Oh, well, so let me play devil's advocate for a moment. So if somebody would argue that, if you're calling them evil, what that will only lead to all-out war or conflict with them. There's no way to work with somebody that you're calling evil. That only leads to conflict.
Well, that's what we did with the Soviet Union, and it didn't lead to conflict. I think the thing that will prevent conflict is a recognition on both sides that nuclear weapons are absolutely devastating to both sides' positions. On the West, it's more about the empathy for loss of life. In terms of China, the party has to fear weapons causing about their downfall. In any kind of high stakes nuclear war. So I don't think it has anything to do with the rhetoric, whether or not we find ourselves slipping into conflict. I think it has everything to do with the weapons themselves. Again, they are a calculus changer. If you look at World War I and World War II, tens, 100 million people dead in World War II, or somewhere around that number. Nothing approaching that since. Why? Well, because of nuclear weapons. They really changed the nature of warfare in terms of what countries are willing to do. It's not a frivolous thing to go to war with a nation that has a nuclear weapon. The other thing that, by the way, that everybody says is, oh, we're so economically intertwined, so we could never go to war. That was proven incorrect in both World War I and World War II. I mean, we were highly economically integrated, and that didn't stop the war from happening. And so, I think what is, again, I believe, is going to prevent us from going into actual military conflict with China is just a sobering reality that it could lead to the end of mankind.
And so from that go ahead, Matt.
Oh, no, I was just, that was a deep sigh of terror.
Yeah, I mean, especially considering that, Mao said he didn't care about the fallout of nuclear war. I don't know if China has that concern about the catastrophes of nuclear Armageddon.
I mean, Matt, that sigh, we all should be having that sigh, because then I think, we would all be a little bit more sober of what the potential for, and the implications of, a military war with China. And that should lead us happily into where we need to be, which is, how do we compete ideologically and economically in ways that promote our principles and values? And when you go there, when you go to that space, then you say, okay, I don't need to spend $1 trillion a year in defense. As long as I have a strong nuclear presence, and I use that, and I make, and this, by the way, this is what we did during the first Cold War. We ensure that the other side knows that these are our red lines, and we're willing to go to war over that. But we won't, as long as you don't cross these red lines. We can accept that the competition then stays ideological and economic. And when it goes there, then the next step there is, we have to cut them off from access to our society, and not just direct access to our society, but indirect access through allies and partners. And so any ally or partner unwilling to similarly cut them off then creates vulnerabilities for our society in terms of ideology and culture, and the political system and our economy. And so I think that's where we can start to get to work, and we can start to divert some of that $1 trillion we're spending on defense into building the strength of our industrial base, our infrastructure, and really reinvesting in our society, sending kids to become scientists and engineers. These are the things that I think we could do if we were not so focused on, hey, we're going to have a war with China and we have an opportunity to win that, which I think is crazy. Nobody wins in a nuclear war, and the idea that we'd have a conventional war that doesn't turn nuclear there's no way to predict that.
Now, what you're suggesting about reducing our economic interdependence with China and the countries that work with China, you're essentially, this is like what happened during the first Cold War, which is you had the first world and the second world in the traditional sense of those terms, which is the first world were the sort of Western allies, and the second world was the Soviet allies. And, they didn't work together, they didn't trade together, but you had really the world very divided. Is that what we want?
It absolutely is. And when you think about the way that the Chinese Communist Party has insinuated themselves in the world system, it is to foul up what are the benefits of living in a free society. And we've been part and parcel to that. And so one of the biggest ones that we have seen destroyed over the last 30 plus years is economic opportunity in the West, as manufacturing has moved, and how as the locus of economic engine has shifted from the West to the East. And I think those that have benefited from that have been, the Chinese Communist Party, and certainly many of the Chinese people. That's great, but what's come with that is this idea that the reason that the Chinese people have fared so well is because of China's system, their social and economic and political system. And there's no recognition of the fact that the technology, talent, and capital that extends, not just built it, but continues to extend it every single day, comes from the free world. And that comes because China is so interconnected with that free world. And so, today what Yellen and their counterparts are trying to do is craft this, clever system, internationally, that allows these two things to be connected, and yet allows the economies and societies of the West to thrive. And what China has built is a system that sucks all of the life out of the West, and so there is no ability to thrive when you have, in essence, almost like a tumor connected to you. And so when we keep these connections going, and we think that we're going to prevent conflict, what we are is basically giving the Chinese Communist Party the tools they need to subvert the free world. And so as long as that continues to exist, the party will get stronger. Western democracies will get weaker. And as that happens, the luster of Western democracies goes away. Who do the people of Africa and Latin America look to? They look to the communist system. Why? Because it's providing for the Chinese people. And I think as long as that happens, this inspiration, right? What is the power of America? The power to inspire. What causes that inspiration? Lifting of the huddled masses, the economic opportunity that comes with being able to choose your own destiny. That has now been subverted. And so now economic opportunity comes by fealty to the Chinese Communist Party. So as long as this is the idea that is allowed to reign in the world, because we think that having China as an economic partner will prevent war, well then over time it will strengthen this idea that authoritarian systems are much better than democracies at providing for that economic opportunity. And the luster will the luster's already gone. The shine will rub off completely of Western democracies, and you'll see the rise of the authoritarian state as the system, just like after, you remember the end of the Cold War, we had all of these former Soviet states flipping to be democracies, almost literally overnight. What you're going to start to see is, this continued move the other direction, where authoritarian systems are far more preferred. Why? Because the elites are benefiting from it, and unfortunately, the people that will get the kudos for that are going to be the Chinese Communist Party, because they're the ones that have created this alternative vision of what it means to live in a modern society.
So you're saying there's a chance I could become Emperor of America someday?
You absolutely could. I mean, that's the crazy thing, and we're already starting to see elements of You can't challenge the narrative. You can't challenge the government narrative. Oh, by the way, that is the same narrative as the corporate sector's narrative and the financial sector's narrative and the academic sector's narrative. What does that sound like? What does that look like?
I don't think YouTube is going to be happy with us posting this.
But let's do it anyway.